Welcome back to the Phoenix Mercury podcast. This road trip was pure chaos, a blatant beatdown in Atlanta, and then move on to a big bounce back win in Chicago. Steven and I are going to have all that and more for you after this quick break here on the PHNX Mercury podcast. What is up, and welcome back to the PHNX Mercury podcast. We're coming to you live on this fine Monday afternoon. I would call it downtown Marina, but I don't think you can call it that. Steven's in lovely downtown Phoenix there at PHNX Sports headquarters. Steven, PG1, QB1, on and off the field, in and out of the studio. How the heck are you doing on this fine Monday afternoon?
Doing great. There's been a lot going on over these last handful of days with the team, and they're starting to figure things out, hopefully. Remains to be seen as they come back home for a nice little home stretch, but all is well. How about you? How you doing?
I'll be honest, and I think I complained about it last week on the show, but like we're getting to the point in the summer where the heat is starting to make me just pure angry all the time. I wake up in the morning, it feels nice outside. I'm like, oh, this is great. It's not going to be that bad today. And then I come back outside, leaving my office after the end of the day, and I can barely get into my car because it is so hot outside. So, I know I don't have it the worst because I feel like Phoenix is actually 2 degrees hotter today. So I won't complain too much, but it's really egregious out here right now. Got to give a big shout out to our guy Kevin Thomas, who's behind the Mac tonight. Kevin, who literally got arrested yesterday and is now here live from PHNX Sports.
We need to stop spreading this nasty rumor that I was arrested when that, in fact, never happened. That never happened. No, Steven. No, I did not get arrested, Steven.
Steven, I want you to know that Kevin, our beloved producer, got into a fist fight at one of the big box stores right in Phoenix and then got sent to jail.
Simply not true.
Well, I'm glad you.
And we can move forward.
I'm glad you're here with us today. I didn't realize that was in jeopardy in any capacity. I'm glad you're here though.
First of all, I'm innocent. Second of all, never happened.
Rob's probably right in the comments. Detained, not arrested. There's a big difference. So I'm just glad that old Kevo Post can be here with us today because who else would be around to make dad jokes when we need them most? So big shouts to Kevo. But I want to start, honestly, I want to get into this, just a little recap of the weekend. I think that's the best place to start. Kind of a big loss in Atlanta for the Mercury, and it was an ugly one, 95-72. And it felt like one of those losses that the Mercury just couldn't get back into at any point in the game. And it kind of stung as a Mercury fan. It hurt to watch. Satu didn't play the second half, which we're going to get into later in the pod today. But, it was a defeating loss for the Mercury. And I saw amongst the fans alike that everyone was very, very frustrated about that particular loss. And I totally understand it. I totally get where everybody's coming from. But I don't mean to make Steven and I sound like big-headed, egotistical maniacs here, but if you've been listening to this podcast, you would know that the Atlanta Dream is a very good team. And if anyone could have the number of the Phoenix Mercury, it's definitely the Atlanta Dream. And so, I definitely hear where everyone's coming from with the frustration in this particular loss, especially coming off the way they lost to Atlanta in Phoenix. Definitely understandable. But that said, let's not sit here and talk about this game as if it was completely shock worthy that Atlanta came out and did their job versus a team that they know they can beat. They beat them on the road in Phoenix. What makes them think that they can't beat them at home in Atlanta? And so I did understand the frustration, but at the end of the day, I kind of felt like it was a wash-worthy loss where it's like, are we going to be talking about this loss to Atlanta come September? Probably not.
I don't know. I feel like if they keep trending in the up and down fashion that they have been of late, that game against Atlanta might be one that we point to, not for the final result, but for the flow of the game. Defensively, by far their worst defensive showing of the season. For full context, the Mercury had a defensive rating of 128.4. That means per 100 possessions off of that game, they were giving up 128.4 points. Significantly, like, just in a whole other hemisphere of bad in terms of the defensive side. And it was possession after possession, giving up straight line drives, giving up secondary drives, giving up every type of paint touch you could ask for if you're an offense. The dream offense was being met with little to no resistance on almost every possession. That leads to, if it's not the person that's driving, someone else getting a wide open catch and shoot 3-point opportunity because someone else had to help. And they just weren't connected on defense. So that's one of the higher offensive ratings for the Atlanta Dream on the season and across the entire W, 128.4. Other thing for me in that game, outside of the actual defense from the team, was the pace that game was played at. We talked about the Mercury being a team that forces opponents into as many turnovers as any team in the W. Last time I checked, they were still above 16. That might have came down after the Sunday win over the Chicago Sky, but still one of the teams that forces the most turnovers from opponents on a per-game basis. Atlanta didn't have many turnovers in that game, and because of that, pace-wise, in terms of amount of possessions, that was one of the slowest games. Was the slowest game on the season for the Mercury. They can't win games if they're not forcing opponents into turnovers to the extent that they need to, but they also are going to find a hard time winning games if they're not getting stops. I think those two numbers are attached to the hip in terms of alignment with one another, and when they're where they're supposed to be, they're a team that's one of the best in the league, and when they're not, we see what we saw in Atlanta.
Yeah, and then when you allow Alicia Gray to get up 7 threes, it definitely makes it a difficult game to win. So, yeah, to your point, Phoenix just couldn't find their defensive rhythm, which if you listen to this show, then you would definitely know that everything starts and ends with the defensive end for the Phoenix Mercury. So if that's not working, then the rest of what they're trying to do isn't going to work because it all starts with the defense. Steven, I'm going to give you just a quick ISO real quick so I can try to fix my camera. So give me just a second, but I'm sure you've got plenty to talk about Friday's loss. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Other things from Friday's loss, as I'm pulling up the box score again to make sure I'm speaking accurately. The Mercury, though they only scored 72 points in that game, I didn't feel like that was a situation where they left offense on the table. It felt like more to me that they just didn't have a rhythm, and it started with the defense because in that game, they only had 9 turnovers. And that's some of their least turnovers total in any individual game across the entire season. So turnovers weren't an issue. Ball movement wasn't the craziest issue. I think they could have been better with it, but I don't think it was for a lack of intention with it. They were okay on all. They were passable enough on offense for me to where I feel like if the defense was at the level that it should have been at, that naturally leads to them playing in transition more, if not playing off of turnovers. And when they're at their absolute best, it's because, like I've mentioned, it's Kahleah Copper pushing in transition after a rebound. It's Sabally pushing in transition after a steal or rebound. It's Alyssa Thomas pushing after a steal or a rebound, and the bun is just bouncing in the air as she transitions to the offensive end of the floor. So I feel like if they're able to get even 25% of what they typically can anticipate on a per game basis in their transition because of the amount of stops that they get and the styles of stops that they get, that gives them 10 more points, and that takes 7 or 8 away from what Atlanta had in that game. And now it becomes a completely different game in terms of the flow. So I feel like they can be better with that. I feel like they will be better with that. I will say that game was an anomaly, but I won't say that the kind of flow of it was, because it's something that we've seen now 2 times against the Atlanta Dream themselves. But we've also seen it against a couple of other teams over that 5-game road stretch that the team is returning home from. So generally speaking, I don't want to ignore that game completely because I think that game was exemplary of if this team isn't doing the things that they need to do, they're not above results like that surfacing against the top level teams. And when they're out of alignment with what their identity is in terms of being a team that is defense heavy first, second, and third, when they're not playing to that identity, things can really shift and it can shift significantly against them. So, like I said, just don't want to. I want to contextualize everything, but I don't want to. I don't want to give it too much attention, but I just don't also want people to completely ignore it as well because they're not far removed from it. They've had one game where they got back in alignment with what their identity is against Chicago, but that also is just one game. And if we're talking about the post All-Star break stretch comprehensively and not just the last 2 or 3 games, that's a game that we've seen more of than we've seen the win against the Mystics and the win against the Sky in post All-Star break. So generally speaking, they got to get back to where they were post or prior to the All-Star break. And yesterday's win was a step in the right direction with that.
Yeah, and I actually am glad I'm back because I heard you talking about scoring in transition and that Atlanta loss, a lot of it can be attributed to how slow the game was played and how they could not get out in transition. And then if you want to talk on the flip side, in the exact opposite vein, a lot of Chicago, they were able to play in transition, and so they obviously looked a lot better. And like when you're playing a team like Chicago, it is a little bit easier than playing versus a team like Atlanta, who's full of all-star capable players, has an MVP candidate on their team right now. Is just overall a more complete team, and obviously the Sky's playing without Angel, who right now is the engine that runs the team over there. So um, yeah, it and to Tanika's in the comments points, like they didn't look too great at the beginning of the game in Chicago either. And
Mm-hmm.
I know Camilla was absolutely cooking them 3 for 4, I believe she was to start the game, finished 2 for or after they started putting in Kalani and Mac, she went to 2 for 7, which is definitely a lot better. But it definitely is becoming kind of a recipe to be able to beat the Phoenix Mercury inside out.
But we knew that coming into the season if they had a flaw on the roster, I think the loudest one was size in the front court,
Yeah,
specifically in the center realm. And how much would Kalani be able to take on minutes total wise for the team consistently? I think those were kind of the biggest questions. And so, in full context, if you're looking at the top 5 teams, top 4 teams in the league, how many of those teams have a dominant post presence that, in terms of size, is a significant plus to what the Phoenix Mercury have in house? We'll probably
pretty
just
much
say
all of
the
them.
Atlanta Dream, right?
Really?
As far as size in the front court,
Yeah, yeah.
if we're talking about New York, we're talking about New York, Minnesota, obviously the Mercury themselves, so you can't put them against themselves. But Atlanta, and if you want to throw in either of Seattle or if you want to sprinkle in another team in that mix, the biggest team in that group is the Atlanta Dream, and they have doubled down on that with Bree Jones and obviously Brittany Griner, both of which the Mercury have succumbed to dominance from. I think that would be the one team. Like Minnesota doesn't have significant size. The way their defense plays, it feels like it, but they don't have significant size in the front court. Obviously, New York just got Emma Mieseman in addition to Jonquel Jones, but in terms of the ways that those players play, those are more perimeter oriented, mid range oriented bigs than they are with Atlanta, with 2 bigs that are the most dominant on the post in the entire W. So I just don't feel like it's as much of an issue to where in any given matchup, you got to worry about teams poking at the Mercury from the post because most teams don't really even play through the post these days, especially to the extent that Atlanta does, which we talked about in previewing that game. So that's something that's kind of baked into the style of roster they have built is kind of what I'm getting at. So it is a weakness, but it's not one that I feel like most teams can exploit in the ways that pretty much only Atlanta has so far this season.
For sure. And I want to get to another point that you were making is just kind of about how things have shifted since the All-Star break. And being that the Mercury is sitting at 17 and 11 right now, and I believe still fourth in the WNBA standings.
Hmm.
My last checking is still correct, but their win rate has obviously cooled down quite significantly, being that they went 9-2 through mid-July, and then now they sit 2-5 over the last seven, which is definitely a tough, place to be if you're a Mercury fan. But I feel like if you also listen to the show, then you know that those big wins early in the season are just that cushion, cautionary tales to make sure that later in the season, when maybe the big three construct doesn't work out exactly as we had foreseen it, or they just need some time to gel together, which is quite literally exactly what we're seeing in front of our very eyes. They have a little bit of wiggle room so they don't fall, to seventh or eighth in the standings. So the Mercury are in a really good spot right now, even though their record may not seemingly say that, and the trend doesn't give a whole lot of people confidence. I definitely like where the Mercury is at right now.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about comprehensively, you have to like where they're at, especially considering most people didn't have them again even making the playoffs, which is ridiculous. But yeah, the fact that they've been a top three team for a majority of the season and presently are top four, um, that's a very great spot to be in, especially considering how close knit basically six through nine are throughout the rest of the playoffs so far. So they're in a really good space in terms of record wise, having done their work early in the season, while other teams were dealing with injuries as well as having so many new pieces. They kind of parlayed that adversity into an advantage for them, just because they established their identity so early on in training camp and through preseason play. So they're in a good spot right now, comprehensively. But again, post All-Star break, which is what I kind of had some numbers on for us to speak through, they got to be better because they have not been that same team that they have been the entire season after this All-Star break stretch. So again, obviously record-wise, looking at the team, they are presently post All-Star break 2-4 through 6 games. Um, in terms of offensive rating, the offense, as we've documented, has not been the issue for the team in any of the games post All-Star break, really. Maybe if you want to exclude that first game against the Atlanta Dream, the first game out of the break. But generally speaking, 103.7 offensive rating for them ranks fifth in the W post All-Star break. Defensively is where it has not been even close to the space that they have been in it all season long, and even at their worst prior to All-Star break, they hadn't been in this space. 107.4. That's tied for the second worst in the entire W post All-Star break. So for a team that's been, generally speaking, no worse than a top 5 defense all season long, and when they've been at their best, they've been flirting with top 2, only being outdone by the Minnesota Lynx comprehensively this season. To say that post All-Star break they're tied for the second worst defense in the W in terms of rating, not gonna get it done. So, um, yeah, those numbers on the defensive end specifically have to be better. If you say they're a top 5 offense at any point, even if you come playoff time, that's more than enough, because if they're pairing that with what is their calling card, which is defense, and that's top 4, top 3, top 2, that'll balance out in a way that helps for them to dictate to opponents, which they've done for a majority of this season so far.
Well, and something I want to talk about before we kind of get into the second half of this show is Satu's absence in the second half versus Atlanta, and then obviously in the game yesterday versus Chicago. Um, and I will be honest in that, being that the announcement was made just minutes before this show started to air that she would be returning in tomorrow's game versus Connecticut, I really don't want to spend like too terribly much time harping on this topic. But I see the streets talking about it on Twitter, TikTok, Threads, literally Blue Sky, everywhere that the tweets can fly. The tweets are flying about where Satu is at. And so, I definitely think that she's such a key piece in what we've grown to know and love about Mercury basketball this season. And so, I definitely understand, again, where everybody's coming from. But I think there's a lot to be said about the team having confidence enough to walk in to another opponent, whether it's Chicago, Atlanta, New York, it doesn't really matter, but without a third of your big three by choice, pretty much, and have confidence to walk in and win the game, especially considering if you listen to Sarah Spain's podcast, you can hear all about their little flight situation. I'm not going to get into that too much on this show either, but like the Phoenix Mercury went through a lot in the 48 hours leading up to that game in Chicago. And so to come in with the confidence they had, and I know that they didn't start super hot in that first quarter, I think being able to flip the script and, basically smoke them for quarters 2 through 3 after that means that much more, considering all they went through to get to the game, and then that first quarter happened. So I'm not feeling pressed about it. I definitely am thankful that the Mercury have as many pieces that they have. Uh, the fun thing is that, we talked at the beginning of the show, at the beginning of the season, about the bench and, is the Mercury going to have bench to hang out with other teams? And the reality is that this bench team has had to kind of like find themselves in the W a lot quicker. And it the rookies and the bench, the depth pieces of the Phoenix Mercury have really had to find their way a lot more than I think Steven or I or they probably ever expected to. And so the fact that they had the confidence to walk into Chicago and do what they needed to do, take care of business, and then get back to Phoenix, I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, it speaks to who this team has shown to be for a majority of this season, and that's resilient. Any adversities, whether it be injuries, whether it be referees, whether it be travel over the initial 5-game road trip that they had prior to the All-Star break, and just sweeping that entire thing. Like, you don't happenstance style walk into that. That's something that's done with intention, and it's done past just intention, because no team goes into any game expecting to lose. But having your habits and having your fundamentals as a team established to where whatever adversity is brought to you, you can always rest on, we've done the work and we've built up these certain types of habits to where we don't have to intentionally go about changing things, because that's just who we are. I feel like those things are very much who they have been for a majority of this season. Mercury vibes only. That's who they are. And when they exude those qualities collectively, not just with individuals, but collectively, is when they've been no worse than the top 3 team in the W. And when they haven't, when they get out of alignment with it, whether it be because of something opponents are doing or just generally how they come into a game at times, we see what those results have been. So they got work to clean up with on that front, but I think they'll generally be fine. But these are moments to learn about this team, even if it's not necessarily what some people are expecting to see from them at this moment.
And Steven, I know you talked to Coach Nate Tibbetts in post game, I believe in both games, and I know you had something to say about Satu's absence, as well as you had a little bit of a different conversation with him as well.
Yeah, this clip from me that I pulled for the show wasn't from me. This was from, I can't remember exactly who it was. Might have been Jesse. I'm not sure, but this was in pregame after Satu was listed as out and out with the team for personal reasons. Jesse asked about what the reason it was for her not being around was, and Nate got straight to the point with it to make sure that there was clarity with that answer.
No, this is a personal matter. She's out for personal reasons, and we support her through this time and are excited to get her back when she's ready.
Yep, so nothing less, nothing more. No need to delve into things that are not what's being communicated to us, because none of us are privy to that information. Satu was away from the team, and per the injury report, which we updated prior to the start of today's show, there was no injuries to report, no absences to report on the injury report for not just the Mercury, but also for the Connecticut Sun. So we got two teams that are going to be fully healthy coming into PHX Arena tomorrow.
One other thing before we get to the ad break, and I do want to touch on this really briefly, it's that Diana Taurasi does have her docuseries coming out with Amazon Prime this week. I think, I'll be honest, my fandom with Diana Taurasi has come a long way since I was on this show. I grew up in a different time of basketball. I grew up in Memphis. I did not grow up here in Arizona. And so coming around to Diana Taurasi was an experience. When you hear about her in the media, she has a certain type of persona that is portrayed by the general population and the media that I don't feel is accurate to who Diana truly is. I think that there are 2 athletes that in my time in the media have really, really, really shaped my opinion of them just based off of how I've seen them interact with others, and that being teammates, coaches, fans, staff in the arena. And those two athletes are Diana Taurasi and Brittany Griner. And I would imagine, being that Brittany Griner's, career coincided so much so with Diana Taurasi, I'd imagine that she's going to be featured quite a bit in this docuseries. So I'm super excited about it. I got my GOAT jersey on today because I saw that they were having the premiere this afternoon here, or not here, but in New York City. I just think it's super exciting. I think it's great for the game in general that they're continuing to put out media that's not just about current athletes. I love the little game breaks that they're doing that talk about, Tamika Catchings and different other all-time greats when you're watching League Pass. So I think, there's a lot of good media attention surrounding the league right now, and this is just furthering that. And I think it gives people a real look into what it is actually like to be in this league for 20 years, which there's really not anybody else that can say that. And so, I think Diana's career is next to none. All-time leading scorer in the WNBA. I could go on and on and on about what she means to the franchise, what she means to this show, what she means to Phoenix, but at the end of the day, I think the docuseries is going to do a great job of doing all of that. But I just wanted to bring attention to that. I don't think we've mentioned it on this show actually at all that she got that. So I think it's super cool. I'm super excited to watch it. I think it's going to be really, really well done. Every docuseries I've watched from Amazon Prime has been really good. No free ads, sorry, Max, but they've all been really good. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, it should be fun to see behind the scenes with anything Diana Taurasi related. Obviously one of the all-time greats. Literally the best scorer that's ever touched the basketball on the women's side, and comprehensively in all of basketball, one of the best scorers ever. Also one of the best at stepping up in the moment, regardless of what stage that might be on. So yeah, salute to one of the greatest of all time. Diana is one of one in many respects, and I think this will be another opportunity for a lot of the new WNBA fans to learn more about just who Diana Taurasi was as a player at her peak, and why she has the reverence that she does from those that respect the game.
Steven, I didn't know if you saw, I dropped that, drop a piece of Mercury lore about yourself, and I had gone to see the Mercury play basketball back in 2019, and it was my first WNBA game, and in it was Simone Augustus. Oh my goodness, I had tweeted about it, but I went back and looked at that box score. What an absolutely diabolical experience that was for me to have for my very first WNBA game. Like, absolutely diabolical. And I'm pretty sure Nafisa is a baby in the picture that I have from the game. I mean, just looking like fresh out of the womb type stuff. So it was a cool experience then. Still cool that I got to do it now. But Diana Taurasi was out sick for my first WNBA game. Maybe that's why I had gripes with her all those years. It's just because I was mad because she sat out for my first game.
Yeah, that's tough.
BG did have a dominant performance in that game though, so it's tough. But I got some good things out of it in the end, you know what I mean? But I do got to get these classic Stang Lover super chats in. My guy is checking in from the DLS Wings show. He said wings for life. Stang Lover, listen, I appreciate the $1.99 super chat, but you got to remember, my heart bleeds purple. And then he also said, if y'all want good vibes, y'all could be the wings. I'm going to be real with the Chief, okay? Our wings, our vibes are very good over here in the Valley. I don't know if you know this, but my squad takes collagen shots every day together, and they play the Lil Jon Shot, Shot, Shot song while they do it. Like, how can your vibes be bad when you're playing Shot, Shot, Shots as you're taking pink collagen shots with Girl Dad and Chrissy Tolliver and Alyssa Thomas and Dewana Bonner? Like, how could you have bad vibes? That sounds like my dream life.
Yeah. Let's hope that Dallas is turning some pages, because no pun intended, because they are in need of some newness down there, and things are growing kind of stale.
I ain't gonna talk too much on it, but I keep having like this overwhelming optimism on the show, and they just keep punching me down, you know what I mean? Like, if I had Thunder Sticks on that show, I would have just blown the Thundersticks up by now. So we're thankful for no Thundersticks on that show. No expectations for the Dallas Wings. You know what I mean? I have high hopes for the Mercury though. If they lose, I'm like, but when the Dallas Wings lose, I can't really be too mad. So maybe I should have Thundersticks for them because they win seldomly. So I should celebrate it more so, huh?
They better hope those draft picks that they got stashed up hit for them because, that Dejounte trade was something.
Something is definitely a word to call it. Well, we'll get back to more on the PHNX Mercury podcast after this quick break. Guys, I don't know if you know this, but everyone needs a checking account. I actually have multiple, and that's kind of annoying, but that's why I need MyStyle from Mountain America Credit Union. You can get the account with built-in benefits just like me. You can enjoy restaurant deals, mobile phone protection, telehealth access, identity protection, loan rate discounts, offers on travel and events, and so much more. Make MyStyle your lifestyle at Mountain America Credit Union. Visit macu.com/MyStyle to apply. Membership is required based on eligibility. Some benefits require no cost registration or activation. Terms and exclusions apply. Interesting. And then, did you guys know that I lost my Circle K gas card last week?
Yeah, you made us well aware. I think Kevo,
it was detrimental to my health. Oh my gosh, when it rains, it pours. You know what I mean? Holy cow!
Don't rain
but
here
it's okay.
in Phoenix, though.
Well, I just mean, figuratively in this sense, because it do be raining on your girl right now, but that's okay because Circle K makes up for it because I'm already in the inner circle. So all I have to do is put in my little phone number at the gas pump and boom, I get 5 cents off every single time I go. And you could be just like me. All you have to do is download the app, put in your phone number, email address, and boom, you're part of the inner circle just like myself, Steven, Kevin. I'm pretty sure Kevin's in the 5 cent off club just like myself. I know Steven is. But all you have to do, you get gas 4 times when you first join for 25 cents off a gallon for your first time, 4 times. And then after that, you're 3 cents off a gallon every single time until you eventually join the 5 cent off club like myself, Steven, and Kevo. But then I don't really mention this too often. Every 5th time you go fill up at Circle K, you get 25 cents off a gallon again. These are just stellar deals. Then you also get your 79-cent Polar Pop, 99-cent Froster. Cookies are $1 each. I mean, the deals they make themselves. So you have to join the inner circle just like myself by downloading the Circle K app today. Terms and conditions apply at participating location. Visit circlek.com for details. Steven, I feel like we've been more negative on this episode today than almost any other episode combined. And so I want to get into...
No way to have been more negative than after that Fever game.
You're right. That was a horrendous
Which was our last
game.
episode.
I tried to wipe that entire episode and game from my memory. You know what I mean? It's can I unplug it and then never have to plug it back in? But there is something that we can be optimistic about, and that is the fact that Kahleah Copper is turning the corner, turning the page to take one out of Steven's book. Oof. I'll crack myself up. But Kahleah Copper returning to true form and turning the page really on what seemingly feels like her getting back into the rhythm. If you've been watching us, you know that we've been talking about the fact that Kahleah Copper is a rhythm player. And so getting these minutes in for her, whether it's in the losses versus the dream or in this big win versus the sky, they're instrumental in her ability to play meaningful minutes later. And I don't mean that in a shady sense. I just mean it in a sense that it is helping her get back to where she needs to be. So, seeing her minutes restriction get lifted slowly but surely is exactly what you want to see. But then on top of it, her, producing in the way she was last night in Chicago with 25 points, it's definitely reasons for optimism for Mercury fans.
Yeah, I think because she hadn't played so much and she just finished her 12th game this season, because she missed so much time, I feel like people were getting stuck with whatever their perception of the Mercury was without having Kai involved or without having Kai at her best version of herself being included with that, whatever that assessment was, whether it was a positive assessment, negative assessment, or indifferent. All of which would be wrong if she's not being heavily factored into what you were kind of assessing this Mercury team to be, because I mean, there's only one player with the Finals MVP on this roster, and there's a lot of talent, but there's only one Finals MVP, and that's Kahleah Copper. Like, these are, like, we're talking about the premier slasher in the entire W. And what I'm getting to with that is, if you look at everything that Alyssa Thomas has been to this team on both ends of the floor, you look at everything that Satu has been to this team, especially when she's been at her best. Take those two things, you add another perennial top 12, no less than top 12 player over the last 5 seasons to that mix. That's a lot to deal with on any offensive possession. And when she's scoring the way that she is right now, it makes all of that just nearly impossible to deal with if they're handling their business on the defensive end of the floor. But Kevo, if we could go ahead and get the Kahleah Copper turning the corners graphic up. You see her numbers over these last 3 games, averaging 22 points, 63.6% from deep on almost 4 attempts. It's ridiculous. I think there's only 3 games so far that she's played this season where she's made less than 2 3-pointers over the course of each game in that 12-game sample size, which speaks to her 3-point growth and the confidence there. 7.3 free throw attempts. I mentioned with Satu, but even more so with Kahleah, one of the barometers for when she's playing at her best. How many fouls is she drawing? How often is she getting to the free throw line? 7.3 free throw attempts is ridiculous. And that's a type of statistical output that there's only a few players, especially from the perimeter group, that are capable of putting out even over just a 3-game sample size. And obviously knocking down the majority of the free throw attempts within all of that. When Kahleah's at her best is when the Mercury are going to be at their best. And over these last 3 games, they've seen some of the best Kahleah over a sustained stretch of games than they have all season long. And those numbers are just really entailing exactly the corners that she's turned in a literal sense with her drives, but also in a figurative sense in terms of her rhythm over the course of the last handful of games. So we got a clip from Nate where he speaks to Kahleah, but also the defense. We'll pay closer attention to the Kahleah portion of that right now, and then we'll kind of come back to it.
Yeah, I think for Kai, I mean, the thing that I love about her, she'll be the first to tell you she's a rhythm player and she needs these minutes. It's getting easier for her. We're starting to see her look more like herself, and a lot of it to me is just the wind and the repetition. It's the defensive thing is a challenge right now because there's not a lot of practice time, right? And it just keeps coming. So I think you learn through film as a team and also individually. We just need to do a better job of containing the ball. We want to bring ball pressure, we want to create turnovers, but it's really hard to guard straight line drives. And we've given up way too many of those, and it's got us on our heels.
Yeah, so again, paying closer attention to the Kai portion of everything that Nate was saying, and we'll spin the block on the defensive side of the things that he spoke to there. Again, this space that she's operating in is ridiculous. She's tied right now for a 5th or 6th over this 3-game stretch, with points per game with that 22, which just speaks to how, again, just dominant she has been in this stretch of games. In addition to that, you look at the free throw attempts, which is a number that we want to consistently kind of hang her hat on in terms of when she's at her best. Over the stretch of games, she's been one of the best in the W with that as well. And you put that in tandem with the 3-point shot that we just got done speaking to prior to Nate talking. That's a player that's putting up all-star level numbers, which we've grown to expect from her over the last, 4 seasons now? So if they're going to be at their best, it's going to be Kahleah operating in this type of space. And the fact that she's sustaining her health, finding that confidence, and her game is reflecting that to the extent of her shooting the absolute best that she has from deep in her entire career, and her scoring being on par with what was her best scoring season, which was last year. I still feel like she has steps that she's going to take that's going to exceed last year's scoring. Maybe not on volume because of the games played, but in terms of impact on efficiency, she's right where she needs to be. And again, their best version of themselves is going to be a heavy dose of Kahleah Copper being involved.
Well, and I think to your point here, the Mercury look the best when Nate Tibbetts can touch the Kahleah Copper button whenever he wants. And so the sooner that Ka gets back to the scoring prowess that we're kind of used to her being for this team, the sooner he can start to learn the best times to press the other buttons. And so I think, it's been fantastic to watch this team without Ka find the rhythm. But if you watch the post game versus the Fever, like I talked about it at length, like it is much different to play with versus without Kahleah Copper. And so the sooner that you can get the likes of Monique Akoa Makani, Lexi Held, even to some extent Natasha Mack back used to doing it, and even Kalani Brown, you have to get all these players reaccustomed to playing in this different type of system, because it does have to take a different kind of shape and look to it when Kahleah Copper's on the floor versus when she's not. And same thing when Satu is out. And so, this right now is a fantastic experimental time for Nate Tibbetts. And so, we're seeing that kind of play out. And obviously, it hasn't played out exactly the way that we have wanted it to over the last 7 games. But I think to act like Kahleah Copper and Alyssa Thomas and Satu Sabally aren't capable of getting back to winning is an absolute diabolical thought. And so I want to get into talking about the defense, but I did want to just bring attention to how good Kahleah Copper has been throughout these 12 games. And she is just getting better and better and better as the games keep coming. And so, other teams are going to have to continue to worry about her, which means, the worry that they had about Monique Akoa Makani 3 weeks ago becomes a little less, because, oh crap, to Steven's point, one of the best slashers in the league is getting back to her true form. Holy crap. Suddenly the, scouting report looks a whole lot different than it did 3 weeks ago. And so, I think we just have to give a little bit of, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but grace to this Mercury team as they refine their footing, because I'm gonna go on record right now and say it. Earlier in the season, Steven and I talked about how the key to this team being really good is the buy-in, and that everyone knew their role and was willing to go execute their role over and over and over again. Whether that be the main scorer or AT being the defensive engine for the team, whatever it was, everyone needed to accept that role and be willing to do it night after night. And that buy-in has not gone anywhere. And I think that that is something that is really key. And honestly, my optimism for the team is just that, they saw the way that they were able to win games earlier in the season. It would be absolutely crazy to not think, oh crap, here I am, 8 games removed from that crazy winning streak. And to think that we can't get back to that is just, it's diabolical. So, and even with, a lot of people have on Twitter today have talked about the Dewana Bonner of it all, and, that she threw a wrench in the chemistry and blah, 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 blah. We're talking about people that have gone to semifinals after semifinals after semifinals, or if you're Ka, you went to a finals, what, 2 short years ago, 3 short years ago? Like, yes, the roles have changed, but their willingness to accept them have not. And so I think that that's something that's really key for this Phoenix Mercury. And yeah, you do. I Homes in the comments, I do understand that it is constant fluidity, but that's exactly what they bought in for, because they wouldn't have bought into anything other than constant fluidity with Kahleah Copper sitting on the bench for 12 games. Or, I'm sorry, I'm lying. More than that. 20, 25 games? Am I closer to that? Closer to accurate there? 18, 20 games? So if you thought that they were going to win the games night after night in the same exact ways with Kahleah Copper sitting on the bench, you're crazy. They had to do it in different ways after different way after a different way. Yes, it started with the defensive end, whether it be with the bench or just AT and Satu out there making it work, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, yes, you're correct. The roles have changed, but their willingness to buy in has not. And so sorry for being long winded there. I just think that this Mercury team is getting a lot of flack right now. And I just think to Homes's points in the comments, like, it is constant fluidity. So how can you expect, something consistent when they haven't had anything consistent for the last like month if they're the Phoenix Mercury?
Yeah. I'll kind of round off the Kahleah conversation and then kind of get to what y'all are kind of speaking to. 22 points. That is, I think that was tied for second, third sixth. I think it was top 5 in terms of scoring over these last 3 games. But specific to the free throw attempts, tied for first with 2 other players. I don't need to name those 2, but you wouldn't be surprised if I said Kelsey Plum and Sabrina Ionescu for the spaces that they've been operating in the last 3 games. Wouldn't be surprised if they're in any conversations where Kai is right now as well. And Kai is also tied for first with in 3-point percentage as well. So if she's operating in that space, that changes everything. And I think to the change point, yes, roles have shifted for the team. What hasn't shifted is the team's identity. And if you're talking about buy-in, you can buy into any given role because you're going to play a different role based off of the opponents that you're up against on most nights. Unless you're Alyssa Thomas, which is you do what you do every night. Everybody else's might shift some, but yours is going to be streamlined more than anyone else. What's not going to be in variance in any capacity is the identity for the team. And the fact that everybody not just answers questions accordingly when they're posed questions with the media, as far as people asking them, people suggesting that they're a 3-point shooting team as their identity, to which most players almost cut the person asking the question off to let them know, like, no, we've won games where we hit 1 or 2 threes. Like that's not the identity. The identity is defense. That's where the buy-in lies for me. Because regardless of who's available, regardless of who they've been going up against, they know that the results heavily are going to consist of being a barometer for what their defense was. When their defense is at its best or even close to it, they've hardly lost games this season. And when it has been more middling or towards the latter end of the league in terms of how they performed on a per-game basis, they've gotten losses in most of those games. So I think the fact that their identity has been streamlined so early, even with having operated with factions of the team and hardly having had the full team comprehensively available, speaks to the buy-in part.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm ready to talk about the defense. I just wanted to get that out there because I've seen all the frustration over the last week, honestly. And again, I totally understand where everybody's coming from. Winning cures all, and Mercury fans got real used to winning for kind of a little bit. And so to be kind of in the losing side of the column for so consistently over like what feels like almost a 3-week period now definitely is frustrating as a fan. But I think when you add context to all of it, it just starts to make a lot more sense.
Yep, for sure. You ready for some defensive
Let's
talk?
get into it, Steven.
Okay. You kick us off just generally. What have you seen from the team when they're at their best defensively versus basically what we've seen for majority of this post All-Star break stretch and on that 5-game road trip that they're coming back from right now?
They're able to get kills, play fast. They are rebounding rebounding the ball as a team, which I think is a really, really important trait to have when you're trying to be a defensive team, because Steven and I have talked about putting the stamps on the end of the defensive possession, and you want anyone to be able to do that. And so I think that this team has anyone that's able to get a defensive stop and then on top of it, grab the rebound when necessary.
Yeah, that's definitely accurate for when the team is at their best. Just some numbers to contextualize what we're speaking to. One of the first thing that comes to mind for me, pressure. And the ways in which they can go about putting pressure on opponents when they're at their best is what has made them one of the 3 best defensive teams in the league. And for my money, comprehensively this season, the 2nd best defensive team when they've been at their best. And the numbers that really pop and speak that to me, and we'll kind of dive into the numbers and players that kind of play to that for them. Percentage of time where they're picking up their opponents in the half or in the backcourt, so before they cross the half court line to get into their offense. 28.6% of the time, the Mercury are picking up their opponents before they cross half court. Number 1 in the WNBA. Average pickup distance in terms of where they're starting their pickup points defensively. They've been flirting with number 1 and 2 all season long, going back and forth with the Washington Mystics. Right now they're number 2, 48.7 feet away from the basket where they're picking up their opponents on average. Average time to cross half court, which means not just are you applying pressure, but how effective is your pressure? Are you actually slowing ball handlers down? To that point, teams are taking 4.2 seconds to get across the half court line on average across the entire season. Number 1 in the league. Average possession length in terms of how much time does it typically take for a possession to end when they're defending. Number 1 is the Minnesota Lynx. Teams average about 16 seconds against them in the half court, or just generally when the Lynx are on defense. When the Mercury are on defense, 15.7 seconds. That's number 2 in the league. And next after them is the New York Liberty. So look at 3 teams who you might think are the best 3 defensive teams in the league. No surprise there that those 3 are top 3. So things that identify with them: pressure, and applying as much of that as you possibly can. Directly aligning with that, Monique Akoa Makani. And I've mentioned pretty much since the beginning of the season that between her and Sammy Wickham, those will be my 2 X factors. And it's been more Monique than Sammy for the defensive reasons more than anything else for me. Her ability to guard at the point of attack is so valuable. I'll put it like this. Because defense kind of gets a lazy eye. People usually only see the blocks. People only usually acknowledge the steals, the loud types of defense. For as valuable to the Mercury as Alyssa Thomas paint touch is, Monique Akoa Makani's point of attack defense is. And by that, I mean Alyssa Thomas paint touches are typically a tone setter for the offense. Monique Akoa Makani's defense is literally a tone setter for their team's defense every single possession. Whether it's after the Mercury scored, whether it's after a Mercury miss, and she's mismatched, but she finds the opportunity to match up with whoever it is that gets the ball first in the backcourt to slow their transition attempt down. And then when you get into the half court, she's usually guarding someone that's using the most screens on the perimeter. How effectively is she navigating those screens? Is she getting clipped and dying on those screens, which then puts the defense in position to where they have to support her or outright switch with her, which puts them in rotations and things like that. When she's sharp with that, they're at their best defensively. When it kind of is middling and there's a little bit of variance there, there's slippage with their general team defense. And when she's not at her best, the team is not at their best defensively. The Chicago Sky game was an example of when she's at her best, they're at their best. Rachel Banham, one of the best 3-point shooters in the W, generally one of the better scorers over the last month and a half of play, did not have fun in that game. And a lot of that stemmed from Monique Akoa Makani steering the wheel of their defensive possessions from the point of attack, mixing in unders, staying attached to the point where help is in position to support her if needed, but the fact that they don't need to and they can stay out of rotations puts them in position to have a successful defensive possession. There's just so many little moments with Monique over the course of that game against the Chicago Sky that really stand out to me, where she's navigating screens and being effective and keeping the defense in their defensive shell the way that they want to be, and everybody else is now able to be their best selves. Alyssa Thomas can go double late in the shot clock because she didn't have to go help somebody else because Monique is doing a great job. Like, all of these little things matter, but directly aligned and directly in the middle and even at the helm of all of that is Monique Akoa Makani being one of the better point of attack defenders in the W. And when she operates as one of the best, that's when they're at their best.
I think that it's kind of undervalued how important Mo has been to the Mercury this season. When she went out with injury, or not injury, I guess the concussion earlier this season, it was glaring how much it hurt the Mercury to us as people that watch the Mercury night in and night out. But I think to some outside eyes, it might not have been so glaringly obvious. But to your point, like, it's exhausting to deal with Mo for 25, 30 minutes of a game. It is exhausting to try to have to get the ball past Mo. And then on top of it, and we've talked about this on the show, when she goes out, then you're dealing with Lexi. It doesn't exactly get a whole lot much better. And so, them at the point of attack has kind of turned this, what would have been a 3-headed snake, into a 4-headed snake because of how important she is to the defensive end of the court for them.
Yeah, that's a lot of what it is. Kevo, if we could get the Monique graphic up now. just to contextualize, see the numbers in front of you of how valuable Monique Akoa Makani is to this Phoenix Mercury team. In the minutes that she has been available for this team this season, they have an offensive rating of 108.9, basically 109 if your math teacher has taught you to round up numbers. Also had a defensive rating of 97.7, combining for a net rating of 11.2. Extremely significantly positive. When she's on the court comprehensively this season, they're operating as one of the best teams in the W. When she is not, whether she's just on the bench for rest in terms of the rotation for the team, or when she's been out because of injury, you combine all of those minutes where she simply is not on the floor for the team, that 108 defensive or offensive rating drops all the way down to 100. In tandem with that 97.7 defensive rating, that's elite, drops down to 104, which is bottom third of the W. And then the net is just significantly lower in terms of being towards the bottom end of the league when she's not on the floor. That alone speaks to the values that she brings. And then when you dive into the kind of impact instances that you speak to with Monique, talked about the point of attack, talked about her navigating screens, talked about the help defense that she shows when she's not guarding someone that's directly on the ball. All of these little things just compile for someone that's simply irreplaceable for this team if we're looking at them being at the best version of themselves on either end of the floor. Some of their best playmaking moments come with Monique when she's handling in scenarios that are either off of attention that Alyssa got or if she's putting everybody else in positions to be successful. She's just great. And I think that the more people understand just how valuable she is and how she is a barometer for when this team is at their best, I think the more understanding of her role, the more understanding of how this team is built. It's a big three built team, but it's a team that's very much by committee. It's not just the big three. It's not the big three trying to lean on the role players. It's very much those two factions of the team kind of meeting in the middle, and that making for a team that has been one of the best in the entire W comprehensively this season.
I am going to be honest with you guys. I have literally not one single time heard Nate Tibbetts speak on anyone on this roster's conditioning being an issue. So I'm not sure where that sentiment came from. It could have been in a practice I missed. God forbid a girl doesn't watch every single Nate Tibbetts clip that comes on to her feed. But I really don't think I've ever heard him speak about conditioning being an issue for anyone on the team, including but not limited to Monique. So, yeah, especially considering the way that the depth pieces and the rookies had to play early in the season, I would think that it's actually the opposite of an issue for them and that they're conditioned quite well, considering how much they've had to play early in the season. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but yeah, I don't think that Monique's minutes being low is a concern. I don't know. Steven, do you recall him saying anything about conditioning being an issue for
Only
these
time
players?
he's mentioned conditioning is when players are coming back from injury, and he speaks to their wind and being able to sustain not just the first shift of a game, but are you able to play through 3 or 4 shifts if you play 6-minute increments and you get to 24 minutes like Monique Akoa Makani does usually? Are you able to kind of play that entire 6 minutes without having impact drop because of conditioning level?
Right.
Like, it's not because someone's out of shape. It only comes up when someone is coming from an injury, which more often than not, depending on what the injury is, but more often than not, you're not doing much physical activity in terms of running, especially if it's a lower body injury or if it's a concussion, because obviously you have to be precautionary with all of those things. So I just wanted to mention those things. But yeah, I don't
They
know why.
also
I don't
do
know
play
where
year round.
conditioning came up in discourse, but
Yeah.
for players that are not returning from injuries, I don't think that's been an issue for anybody on this Mercury team at all.
Yeah. I also, to your point, Holmes, in the comments, like they do play year round. Like I'm actually entirely confused because they do play year round. They go overseas or to Unrivaled or on Athletes Unlimited, basically anywhere because they only make a little bit of money in the WNBA, so a lot of them make their money elsewhere. So I'm sorry if I'm breaking news to you, but they actually do play basketball outside of the WNBA season. So, yeah, I don't think that was ever an issue, but I do think that it's been yeah, there's no conditioning issue here for the Phoenix Mercury. So, anyways, we're done with that. Yeah, the Monique is very important to the team. Sorry, I got off topic there. That really just it confused me as to why I was seeing those comments. Considering I've never heard that in my entire life, but that's okay. Yeah. Anything else we missed today, Steven?
Yeah, I did talk with Nate about the defense a lot the last two games,
Mm-hmm.
or after the last two games. One of the big things we talked about was after the Atlanta game, them not. Actually talked with him and Sammy about it. Them not being able to contain the ball felt like the domino that fell that left the rest of their defense consistently in compromise. And because of that, and it's spanning over a couple of games in a row, there was like I don't want to say lack of trust in a negative fashion, but there was a kind of let's defend and try to anticipate mistakes more than trusting that person that was on the ball. No different than in anybody else's job. If a job is not getting done, there's gonna be some questions to where you're gonna try to compensate just to keep the team afloat. They got back in alignment with that, obviously, in the game against Chicago. And I spoke to them after the game about some of the specific types of switches that I'll kind of detail a little bit more after we hear Nate speak to it. But here's Nate speaking to peel switches and why they're so effective for this Mercury defense.
Yeah, I think when you get into your peel switches, to me, you're doing a pretty good job of controlling the ball, but also just communication and our help side awareness. We talked about before the game, there's been too many blow-bys, right? And like when that happens, it's just tough. It puts a lot of pressure on your defense. Straight line drives are hard to guard. So there's got to be some resistance. I thought we had 3 or 4 good peel switches. And part of that was just our communication, our weak side awareness.
Yeah, he talked about communication, weak side awareness, but all of that coming secondary and tertiary to the person that's guarding the ball. And it gets back to the fundamentals. How well is the person that's guarding the ball staying in front of or attached to that person that has the ball in their hands? It's really as simple as that. You can't have a defensive scheme whether you want to switch, whether you want to play drop, whether you want to hedge, whether you want to do any sort of combination of all of those defensive coverages. You can't get to the coverage part of it if there is no coverage on the ball. So them getting out of alignment with being able to contain it in the ways that they showed that they were capable of earlier this season over the last 3 or 4 games prior to yesterday's win really just kind of spoke to just the ups and downs, how hard it is to play defense. But they've gotten back in alignment with that, I would say, rather quickly. I imagine there were a lot of clips that flew around from the Atlanta game that kind of showed you can be better here, you can be better there, you can be better here. And we saw them get back in alignment with that, largely starting with Monique Akoa Makani and everything that she did against Chicago. It kind of reverbed to everyone else. And when you get to a point where you're able to contain the ball consistently and even potentially influence ball handlers to certain pockets of the floor, now you get into a position where you can get into things like you can have your help defense get into these scenarios where you're peel switching. So what a peel switch is say I'm guarding someone that's on the ball and say Erica is the next layer of help in the direction that I'm kind of influencing the ball handler to go towards. If I stay attached to that person that's trying to drive, and then Erica, because she has an angle that's closer to the basket, can step over and take over for that person that's trying to drive the basketball for me, and she peels off of her matchup, off the ball, and onto the person that's trying to drive to the basket, that's what it is. Peel switch. We're switching matchups on the live dribble going towards the basket. And the Mercury, when they're at their best, are able to contain the ball enough to where if Monique happens to get driven, she's not getting blown by. She's still attached to that person to where it's not a full head of steam downhill. That next person can step over, cut that player off from getting a paint touch or getting to the basket, and then she switches on to that person that just got done helping her. So it's just little things like that within their defense that when they're at their best, you see a lot of these things happening time and time again. And that's when they're at their best, when their defensive shell looks unique, because what looked like someone that you could drive to in space Now there's help there, and then you're consistently being kept from getting paint touches, and that's when they're at their best.
Well, and if you go back to the beginning earlier in the season and you watch our pod, we talk about how their ability to recover on the switch is better than almost anyone else in the league. And so, their options defensively were just there consistently over and over and over again. And if they made a little mistake, there was a big kind of wiggle room for them to make that mistake because so and so over here is going to make up for it. And so, to our points on this pod today, they have kind of gotten away from that and they do need to get better at doing that. And they do need to get back to doing exactly what their identity is, which is that. And so I think once that happens, this team, once they get back to doing exactly what their winning was all rooted in the first place, then the team is going to be back to optimism and we'll be looking up at a playoff spot. Steven, I keep having technical difficulties. Everyone can yell at me on Twitter, here in the comments. I really don't care. You can yell at me all you want. I can take it today. I'm just make me your punching bag, and my camera keeps not working, so just go ahead and yell at me. But what Steve and I are gonna do now is because our next show is not till Friday morning at 11 a.m. We're just gonna go through the week, give a little prediction. It's a chill week here on Planet Mercury. Just two little home games on the week on Thursday, or Tuesday and Thursday evening. They start on Tuesday with the Connecticut Sun, and then they wrap on Thursday with the Indiana Fever. Also, I should point out, just because we haven't mentioned it, Thursday is also the trade deadline. So, they could have someone and I don't mean they as in the Phoenix Mercury, but like literally any team in the league could have someone warming up. And then by the time the game comes around, it could be time for them to pack their bags and go somewhere else. So, yeah, it's the last time that you might have to say goodbye to someone from your beloved team while the season is still going on. So be thanking God for that. And yeah, so predictions, I am gonna say it. I predict that the Mercury go 2-0 on the week, and that when we come back on Friday, we're talking, very positively about the Mercury. I even threaten to get the Thunder sticks out, because that'll be three. So I think that the Mercury will go 2-0.
I think being able to practice tomorrow or have a shoot around tomorrow rather, I think that's gonna help them. The fact that they're back home, it's not a full practice per se, but I think them being able to just be back home, be able to kind of run through things in a way that they weren't able to after the Atlanta game because of the travel difficulties and things like that. I think it's going to do them a solid bit of positive in terms of getting back in alignment to sustain on the defensive end of the floor. I will also mention that Stephanie White provided an update on Caitlin Clark. She remains without a timetable with the groin injury. So they said she's doing things on the floor, but she's not 100%, and they basically don't want to bring her back until she's at that 100% mark. So I imagine that means we don't see Caitlin in this matchup on Thursday with the Indiana Fever. And because I said that, Caitlin will be playing on Thursday against the Mercury. So go ahead and be ready for that. But I think they end up getting both of these two games. I don't think the Connecticut Sun are playing the best basketball right now. They're also not the most connected team as well. They're a team that's akin to the Chicago Sky in multiple respects. They both have different flaws and different reasons why they're towards the bottom of the league. But generally speaking, they're not the most high-functioning teams right now. I think that's an opportunity, again, not unlike the Sky game, for the Mercury to take advantage of the schedule presenting them with these opportunities to get back in alignment with the team that they're supposed to be at this point in the season, just by way of going against teams that might not be playing the best or might not be healthy in the case of the Sky. So taking advantage of the schedule, using it to your advantage, springboarding that into practice on Wednesday where you can actually get down to the nitty-gritty, reestablish some habits, maybe add some new layers to your process, and then get to that game on Thursday, because whether Caitlin Clark plays or not, this is an Indiana Fever team that can beat you, and quite literally just showed that less than a week ago by the time Thursday's game comes around. So being ready and prepared for that game and playing a comprehensive 4 quarters, not 2.5, not 3.5, playing a full 4 will get you a win against that Indiana Fever team. I'm imagining they're going to want to do that before we get to our next podcast on Friday, because on Sunday, very fun game in store for them.
Well, my computer is frozen. I do believe it's the Atlanta Dream, but I could be wrong about that. Am I wrong?
Correct.
I'm
Correct.
sorry. Like I said, my computer. That's what I said. Technical difficulties today. They just bite. When it rains, it pours. People. Woo! I'll try again. Okay. It's not New York.
No, you got it. It's Atlanta
Oh,
on
I
Sunday.
thought I was wrong. Okay.
No, I said Sunday. Yeah, Sunday's Atlanta.
Period. Okay. Yeah, no. And hopefully Ryan Howard will actually be back for that game. I was a little disappointed and just because I put it into the world that she was going to play and then boom, I look like a dummy and so, I really hope that she does play cuz then I will look like a little bit less of a dummy, but I think it also will say more for the Phoenix Mercury to beat her or beat them with Ryan Howard versus without, and having lost to them twice now without Ryan Howard, I think they kind of need that win over them. So I don't want to call it a must-win game because we don't do that here on the PHNX Mercury podcast, but I would be really excited if they did win all 3 games this week.
I mean, after going 2-3 on that road trip, I mentioned they needed to be above 500 on that road trip prior to it starting. They finished on the opposite side of that. So the way to not dip too much into the work that you did for yourself early in the season, make up for those by coming back home, running this table in this next week of games. You got two viable teams and one team that can test you if you allow for them to in the Connecticut Sun. It's not going to be a walkover game at all. Come out and handle your business in a very business-like approach, which they've shown to do all season long. Start to compile some rhythm and some chemistry with your team fully intact for multiple games in a row against different styles of teams too. You can kind of make up for a couple of those games on that road trip where you felt like you should have won some of those games by getting back even at home and continuing to be one of the better teams in the W on your home court. So again, best thing about the schedule, 44 games, there's a little bit more room for error, but there's also more room to make up for error because of the way that the schedule is set up. So perfect opportunity for this Mercury team. Mix in some wins, mix in some practice, play at home, have the team fully intact without injuries in any capacity to worry about, at least to start this home stretch. You got to take advantage of the moment. You have to.
And I'm gonna say this, and I don't want to dog on anything too much, but the tickets for tomorrow's game, cheapest that they've been all season, people. Bring your rear end to PHX Arena, okay? If you haven't seen this team play in person yet, this is the perfect opportunity. Plus, I'm pretty sure the freaking grocery store was giving away free tickets to the game. So if you don't already have your tickets, that's on you. And now you can pay a really, really cheap price to make up for the fact that you didn't get your free tickets, but that's okay because again, they're super, super cheap, and you can go on there and get them online. And so, yeah, I expect a full arena tomorrow. I also expect a super full arena on Thursday. No tear shade to the Fever fans, but it is fun when they come in. It's super loud. It's just a really it's every basketball fan's like favorite type of environment where it's a little hostile even on your home court, and so it's a fun environment, I won't lie. So I'm excited for this Thursday game. I think it's going to be really fun, and I think that hopefully come Friday, Steven and I are talking about a 3-game win streak, and then on Sunday, party people, I get to pop out these darn thunder sticks. I'm so excited. So Mercury, don't let me down. If you're watching this right now, please, I'm on my knees this time. I would really like to bust out the thunder sticks. So we have a chance. Get it done.
Last
And I'm
thing,
not honking either, again, until it's all done. So,
last thing
Go
I'll
ahead,
mention
Steven.
just to make sure names get said, because we didn't dive into too much outside of a handful of the kind of main topics. Kalani Brown makes her first start of the season, has a very impactful game for the Mercury. We both mentioned that she's going to play a big part in everything that this team ultimately wants to be, literally because of her size and the way that helps for them to match up with certain opponents, but figuratively too, because they just don't have someone else that can do some of the things that she does on the glass with certain matchups like a Camila Cardoso or potentially a Brittany Griner or a Breezy Jones if they happen to match up with them come playoff time. She just has things that she can bring to the floor that no one else can really replicate because of that advantage that is her size. But other thing, Natasha Mack, honk, yes, she's been continuing to get it done in the multiple roles that she's played. She started some games. She's been the first big off the bench in some games. She's been the second big off the bench in some games. One thing that hasn't changed is her impact. That motor is a skill, and it's one that's unique from anyone else on the team. Alyssa Thomas is the engine. No one has a bigger motor on the team after Alyssa Thomas than Natasha Mack. And that is something that really helps when they're on the floor together, because it hits like a turbo boost, if you will, if we're talking about motors, and the ways in which they can both kind of compile it, and the kind of frenetic nature that they both operate with on defense. Other two big names for me, Sammy Wickham has not been shooting the best. I imagine some home cooking in terms of knowing the Rams and PHX Arena, getting up shots on the Noah system at practice and that shoot around, and just playing in front of the home crowd, I think is going to get her back in alignment with that top-tier sniper that she is. And then Lexi Held, she's been healthy the last handful of games, and that's the most important thing. Starting to get her wind back from having a literal collapsed lung scenario that took place. Not the most ideal situation injury-wise to be trying to come back from in the middle of a season, especially for the heart-charging style of play that she plays. I imagine she's going to be happy to be back home as well. And the more games she gets back under her belt, the more she gets back to that six-player type of role that she was playing for the team. So just some names to mention because we didn't mention them over the course of the show. I also think that Satu is going to have a significant chip on her shoulder, because any great player who was asked to be coached hard and has been grateful openly for being coached in the ways that she has been this season, the demands that Nate Tibbetts has placed on her, the accountability that he's brought to her doorstep with each moment this season, whether she's been playing well or she hasn't been, she's been very accepting of it. I have multiple conversations where I just ask her about the difference between here and Dallas, and she speaks to being coached hard and being grateful for that. You can say what you want about what happened in Atlanta. I imagine she's going to have a loud response that results in her being the player that they brought in and the player that she knows that she is coming through this next handful of games at home.
Well, and to just speak on one of your points really quick, the Mac piece of it all. We talked earlier in the show about the buy-in of it all, and Mac has been a huge, huge, huge culture builder for Nate Tibbetts and his staff. And so her willingness to do whatever they need her to do on a game by game basis and that look different, that should tell you everything you need to know about Nate's ability to get players to buy in and his players' willingness to buy into what he's asking them to do. And so, does it always work out perfectly? Certainly not. It's not a perfect world. It's the earth, for crying out loud. But, it will get better and better as the season goes on. And so, all right. So we got
Well,
2-0 on the Mercury this week. Go ahead.
Last thing, Kevin, you've been quiet this whole episode, brother. Predictions for this week. We got 3 games: Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. Connecticut on Tuesday, Indiana on Thursday, and then we got Atlanta coming back, spinning the block again on Friday or Sunday rather. Record prediction: what you got this week?
2-1.
Okay.
I don't know how I'm gonna cut it.
No, that's not gonna get it done. You got to speak on which game you see them having some trouble with.
I feel like you got to get revenge against the Dream.
Mm-hmm.
That just feels karmically right. I feel like
so are you saying they're gonna lose against the Fever?
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. The 2-1 doesn't work, but also 3-0 feels way too. I don't know. I do want the Thundersticks, to be honest with you, so I feel compelled to say 3-0.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say 3-0.
Erica said 3-0. I said
want the damn
3-0.
Thundersticks.
Kevin said 3-0 as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see about
Man.
it. I will say to Kevin's point though, and I hesitated a little bit with the Indiana game. The ways in which they switch on defense is akin to the ways that we've seen the New York Liberty defend the Phoenix Mercury, and obviously even more so we've seen the Minnesota Lynx defend the Phoenix Mercury this season. Teams that have been most successful defensively against the Mercury have been teams that can switch viably in scenarios where other teams might not want to, which puts them in rotation, and that's where they get some of their best offense from. They have to be better with their process against the Indiana Fever. Natasha Howard is having one hell of a defensive season for that team, in addition to Aaliyah Boston. If they're better with not turning the ball over, I think that's a game the Mercury can win by double digits. I feel like they could have won last week's game by double digits if they didn't have that second quarter, that last 6 or 7 minutes of the second quarter that they did. So about righting your wrongs, you're not going to be able to copy and paste the same game plan and expect to just switch one thing and it's going to get the different result. But generally speaking, if they take care of the ball against the Indiana Fever, I think they should win that game by double digits. But very much going to be a test for them. I'm looking forward to assessing each and every one of these 3 games this week.
It's gonna be fun. Like I said earlier in the show, our next pod is Friday at 11. I want to say huge shouts to all of you guys for hanging out, even with all of our technical difficulties. And by our technical difficulties, I do single-handedly mean my technical difficulties. So be sure to leave a like wherever you get your podcast, 5-star reviews, all that good nonsense. Become a diehard while you're at it. You get a free t-shirt, access to Die Hard Discord Lounge, and you get discounts on events like the really cool one we have coming up on August 22nd when the Phoenix Mercury take on the Golden State Valkyries. It's just a lot of good times going on over in the Die Hard land. So be sure to come become one today. Literally the first link in the description down below, and you can become a Die Hard. Join the Discord Lounge with Steven, myself, Kevin. I even hear 30-year-old Damon understands how to use Discord. Oh my gosh, I know, isn't that diabolical? But you can follow Kevin on Twitter at KevoPost. You can follow Steven at StevenPG3. You can also follow myself at Eric Lee Day. And you can follow all of us together making really fun Mercury content at PHNX_Mercury on Twitter. And we will be back with you guys on Friday at 11. Thanks.
We all silly like the mayor.